Hello, if you've just joined us, welcome to SAREF 2.0. United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 7 aims to provide affordable and clean energy for all. This session looks at how we can achieve energy poverty eradication in ASEAN. Moderating the session, please help me welcome Dr. Chen Shiun, VP Rural Electrification of Sarawak Energy, who will be introducing our panelists. Dr. Chen is the VP for Rural Electrification in Sarawak Energy Berhad, the electrical power utility group in the state of Sarawak, Malaysia. He holds a Bachelor of Engineering and a PhD from the University of Canterbury, New Zealand. It's over to you, Dr. Chen.
Thank you very much, Ms. Freda Liu, for the nice introduction. A very good afternoon to everyone. Sorry for the slight technical issue that we face here. And welcome to Session 1 of SAREF 2.0, Sustainability and Renewable Energy Forum. The topic of our discussion today in this session is energy poverty eradication, or simply called energy access for all. Now, can I have the first slide, please? Yeah. The very first goal in United Nations 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, is to end poverty, and to end poverty in all its form, right? And everywhere as well. So one obvious issue that we are addressing is access to energy, especially in developing countries. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, what we all know, or has been proven time and again, is that energy drives development. Okay, so we can see from this chart on the productivity of countries versus their energy consumption. Okay, those with ready access to energy are able to build stronger, more productive, and more resilient economies. So for country to progress, it is obvious that we must look into their access to energy. Okay. Next slide, please. SDG has specific goals. Goal number 7, to address energy access. So it says, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. We have some basic data here from the United Nations database, just to set the scene here for today's session. Okay. So we can see that the access to global electricity have increased from 83% to 90%, over the last 10 years or so. But there are still 759 million people don't have electricity. In 2019, about 2/3 of global population have access to clean cooking fuels and technologies, but that still means 2.6 billion people are exposed to household air pollution on a daily basis. Okay. And between 2010 and 2018, we can see that the share of renewable energy in global energy consumption has increased, but just slightly, from 16.4% to 17.1%. But what is more concerned here is that the low share, the renewable energy share in these various sectors here. Electricity generation at about 25%, heating is below 10% and 9.2%, and transport is only 3.4%. So it's obvious that there's a lot of efforts are needed here. And finally, and financially in 2018, 16 billion flow into the developing countries to support clean and renewable energy projects. But that is 35% lower than in 2017, and only 32% higher than about 10 years ago in 2010. And we can see the distribution of where the money goes, right? The majority of the financing go to hydropower, solar, and some to geothermal and wind and the others. So, next slide, please. So, what are the goals set by SDG 7 then? The target timeline is by 2030, We like to ensure universal access, but would like to use renewable energy or clean energy, not to make similar mistake to overly dependent on fossil fuel or some unsustainable energy resources. We need to be more careful in how we use energy to be more efficient. Okay? And we need to encourage and develop more international cooperation, especially in investment on clean energy research and technologies. Okay? And lastly, there should be a specific focus on developing and upgrading the basic energy infrastructures in the developing countries. Next slide, please. In today's session, we have 4 distinguished speakers representing different sectors from government, intergovernment agency, and NGO to share with us their views, their approaches, and strategies of energy access issues. Okay. Can I see the next slide? So to start the session, please allow me to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Sooksiri Chamsuk. Ms. Chamsuk is a deputy representative for UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and she's based in their Bangkok office. She is UNIDO Regional Program Officer for the ASEAN countries. She engaged the various teams in the countries to develop low-emission sustainable development projects according to the needs in the respective countries. So which will cover things like clean energy, climate change mitigation, environmental and sound chemical management, green and circular economy. She will be talking to us about UNIDO projects on poverty eradication in the ASEAN country, with specific focus on energy-related projects. So Sooksiri, to you, please.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Sooksiri Chamsuk from UNIDO. I'm so honored to join this second forum again this time. It could have been nicer to be back in Kuching in person should this pandemic not exist. However, we have to live with this new normal. So without further delay, I'm going to walk you all through how UNIDO has placed importance of energy services for industrial development as a means to reduce poverty, in particular for ASEAN countries. For UNIDO, UNIDO enables countries to increase their competitiveness through the use of clean and renewable energy. Then we can achieve sustainable, low carbon industrial development together with developing countries. For UNIDO, energy services are crucial inputs to production and industrial development. So let me give you a first example. Next slide, please. This is in Cambodia. We are implementing our flagship program called the Program for Country Partnership, or PCP in short. The PCP is a multi-stakeholder partnership at a country level. Each PCP is tailored to the country's specific needs. Next slide, please. For the PCP in Cambodia, we started the implementation phase in December 2020. And I hope you can see from the slides, we identify 3 priority areas. These include sustainable tourism, eco-based industry, as well as creative industry value chains. And lastly, we focus on industrial diversification, in particular to the development of special economic zones. And again, if you can see from the slide, sustainable energy is among other interventions being implemented as cross-cutting areas. This is to ensure a comprehensive approach that addresses the needs of the stakeholders and marginalized groups. Next slide, please. Now we are zooming in to the sustainable energy project in Cambodia under this PCP program. Since the rate of the access to energy services is not so high in Cambodia, as Dr. Chen pointed out earlier. We in Cambodia, under this program, we focus on improve access to energy services. In this case, is electricity in underserved areas. We select biogas power production system because it can be attached to pig farms. And so far, we did 10 feasibility studies. And out of these 10 feasibility studies, we have 6 farmers agreed to invest in this biogas power production system. So all these investment on the biogas power production system from these 6 farmers, we will have an accumulative of 2.9 megawatts. So it's almost 3 megawatts installed from biogas-based power generation by the end of the project. And not only we work at the farm level, we also work with the policy level. Biogas policy is being updated. We also have organized commercial biogas development training for financial institutions such as banks. Next slide, please. Here, as again, Dr. Chen already laid the foundation for those countries with high access rate of the electrification. UNIDO offers another flagship program. We call it an eco-industrial park approach. An eco-industrial park must demonstrate higher standards of environmental and social responsibility, resource efficient production methods, and reuse of waste energy and waste materials. So applying these high standards transforms a conventional industrial park to an eco-industrial park. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This slide shows an eco-industrial park approach which has to take place in 3 levels. The first level is at manufacturing level. We apply following tools: resource efficient and cleaner production, low carbon technology, green chemistry, renewable, and energy efficiency measures. Next level is an industrial park level. We foster the sharing of the following resources: collective resource efficient solutions, including access, energy exchange, and waste exchange. We share infrastructure. We also aim to share material supply and other services as well. At the last level, which is a city level, for an industrial park to co-locate in harmony with the surrounded community. A sustainable symbiosis should be achieved to waste management, material recycling, and corporate social responsibility. And moving on to the last slide, please. So we apply this approach. So let me give you just one example in Vietnam. Although in ASEAN countries, we are implementing this approach in Indonesia and Thailand as well. So as a result of the project that we implemented this approach in 4 industrial parks in 3 locations in Vietnam, we achieved the following: improve resource efficient through the reduction of the use of raw materials, waters, and energy, and hence overall we achieved the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from these industrial parks, reduce production costs, and we improve competitiveness and profitability of those factories in those parks. So this brings me to the end of my intervention, and I'm happy to elaborate more should you need more information. So thank you for your attention, and over to you, Dr. Chen.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Sooksiri. Okay, before I proceed, just like to let everyone know, if you have any question, please use the chat feature to enter your question, and then we'll attempt to address your question if the time's allow. Okay, and we will and also we'll collect the question and direct to the speaker if you have any specific question for them. Okay. Now, maybe just allow me to have a quick question to Ms. Sooksiri. Thank you for a very comprehensive presentation on the program of UNIDO. And there seems to be, you're doing a lot. There are many things that need to be done, across all these different countries. So I just wondering, among all these things, you look at energy as well. So how high is the priority of providing energy access, especially to low income and underprivileged communities?
Sure. That's why I also gave example of our project in Cambodia. So basically, in particular, the countries with lower rate of electrification, we focus on projects that foster investments on renewable energies. So here the example, if you can go to the slide 3 from Cambodia, I think slide 3. So basically, in Cambodia, they have a lot of pig farms in rural areas. So that's why we arrive into this biogas power production. So we use the pig farm menu and do the methane recovery technology, and that provide the power production from that methane recovery. So it's actually not that financially attractive yet, because if you compare to just install diesel generation set for those community, is cheaper. But again, as you mentioned, they are around 14. So these projects, so that's why UNIDO comes in and provide both technical advice, and as well as help those pig farms to invest and talk to the bank. We help them coming out with the bank kind of proposal so that they can invest in this biogas technology. So yes, the challenge is there in the sense that we try to we aim at foster the low carbon and renewable energy power production, kind of a decentralized system to these underserved areas. In particular, that is our approach for the least developed countries with the low rate of rural electrification.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Sooksiri. So I can what he's trying to say is it depends on the situation of each of the country, and I think UNIDO is very good in terms of providing not just the know-how, technology, and policy, but also you need to look after the financial aspect as well on how to make the project happening. All right, we'll come back to you later on when we have the time. Now let's move on to the second speaker. Our second distinguished speaker is Encik Syed Mohamad Fauzi. So Encik Fauzi, he's the Director of Electricity Supply in Sarawak, basically the regulator of all electricity business in the state of Sarawak in Malaysia. Okay, so I think you can read on his CV from the website. Just want to introduce that in the last 3 years, he was specifically tasked to oversee the Accelerated Rural Electrification Master Plan project in Sarawak, aiming to achieve full coverage by or before 2025. So today he will share with us this journey taken in Sarawak, the initiative, the programs that we have, the success stories, as well as the challenges. Okay, Encik Fauzi, please. You need to unmute, Encik Fauzi.
All right.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, thank you, Dr. Chen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We'll look at energy poverty eradication from Sarawak's experience. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. So as mentioned, we have a vision to achieve full electrification for Sarawak by 2025. Next slide. So our overall coverage is at 98.5%, where where infrastructure has been constructed, there's full coverage, while in rural there's 95.8% coverage. And there are left remaining 4% of coverage, which is about 16,500 households need to be electrified. Next. Since 2009, where there's a focus on the rural electrification in Sarawak, the growth has, until to 2021, growth from 56% in 2009 to 95.8% in 2021. And this constitute a connection to 130,000 rural households. Next. We have few schemes that we try to reach to the various rural households. We have the grid connected schemes. This is the rural power supply. These are high voltage system, and it's what they call it, the medium voltage covered the distribution level, the associated project with 2 RPSS. There are 10 of them. And then finally the rural electrification last mile that will connect to the household there. And in the interior areas like Baram, Telang Usang, and the interior of Kapit, we have off-grid system, which is a hybrid, and the Sarawak Alternative Rural Electrification Scheme, which we call SAREF. We also have additional OLED applicant fund, because after we completed the projects, there are some houses that were not completed at that time, or new projects or new houses that came up will be connected subsequently under this fund. We also provide assistance under the assisted wiring scheme, so that this household can get connection through the internal wiring, and they will do monthly payment for a period of 36 months. It's a form of assistance to relieve the burden of the household. Next slide. So some of the schemes that we have, the rural power supply scheme at a very high voltage that we try to get to the interior and to reach to the maximum number of people in the interior. We have the rural electrification scheme, the last mile connection, to get the supply right to the household in the interior. Next. And where it is really remote in the interior, where we have no accessibility or far from the grid, we use the system of hybrid, which in this case, it is supplemented with diesel, with 80% from renewable high energy and 20% for diesel. This will be used at places where you have a larger household, about 90, and then normally we have public facilities such as schools and clinics. For smaller communities, we use SAREF, Sarawak Alternative Rural Electrification Scheme, where this is, we have two systems, which is centralized, where it's a bigger community, although smaller than hybrid, but then even smaller, it will be a single solar rooftop, as you can see from the two pictures here. And you have energy quota for this system here. So we go to the next slide. For SAREF, we keep has capacity to the household at a maximum of 1 kilowatt and energy at 3 kilowatt per household, allowing the following equipment you can see in there: TV, fridge, lighting, fans, and small rice cooker to be used. So we find that this amount of energy is sufficient for these basic necessities to be utilized in the household in rural areas. And this is intended to increase the lifespan of the battery and the system there. Next. So there are benefits for connection to the grid, and in particular, I would like to highlight the benefit of SAREF. Here, SAREF is provided to the community free, because it is community based. They have to do some maintenance themselves, and here they are able to save also for not using diesel, which also have a very limited time. They use from 7 p.m. until 12, and the saving is between 300 to 400. There's also an increase in quality of life, and in particular now they have a sense of equality with the urban folks, as they have received 24 hours of electricity in their community. Next. It opens up the villages to the world. In particular, children now will have access to information from TV and social media. And from socio-economic development, there are potential for them to see if there anything they can do in their areas for business opportunities. If they have ecotourism potential, they can probably have homestay, for example. So this will facilitate for them to seek opportunities, even though the power may be limited, but still opportunities are there for them to, it's open up for them to see. All right, so this is my presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, Dr. Chen, back to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Fauzi. Maybe just a quick question to you. In Sarawak, you have done a lot. So what do you think is the biggest lesson learned from this journey? Perhaps something that can be shared with other countries that may face similar challenges. What do you think the lesson learned basically?
For Sarawak, we have a very challenging terrain. It is getting full coverage to every corners of Sarawak. So we have to think of the various ways that we need to reach to them. So we have initially mentioned about the grid, and subsequently, because of the interior that is very far from access roads, for example, and from the grid, we need to find new ways of bringing the supply to them. Now the issue for the grid, which is a bit nearer, maintenance may not be an issue. It can still be reached by, for example, the service provider. But in rural areas, that is the biggest challenge. How can we sustain this system far in the remote? Because simple thing like when you have fuse that blows, etc., that you will not get power, you have somebody who will go all the way there to fix it. So what we have tried to find or to solve this thing is to put SAREF as a community base, training them to do basic maintenance, grass cutting, probably very simple fuse replacement, cleaning of the panels. And for the more complicated maintenance or routine maintenance, the licensees, or in this case the utility providers, still will have to provide that service. So we can share that since 2016 when we first started the project SAREF, those equipment, those systems until now are still operational. And we are now moving into the phase of funding for its operation. Now that is another areas which is also a challenge, because these areas are not, we are providing facilities to places where they do not generate income. They are in the remote areas. So therefore, to sustain it over long term, you would need resources, funding, in order to ensure continuity, because once supply is given, you have to continue to provide the supply. So all these things, we are looking at them. We are seeing how we can provide as long as possible the supply there to the community, and then to maintain and operate the system in the interior. So back to you, Dr. Chen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fauzi. Yeah, I think you spoke a very important thing. The solution seems to have to target according to the community, what the community is able to use the system and able to assist in sustain the operation of the system. Yeah, let's move on to our third speaker, and I think she would share with us about the approach that she has on community engagement and importance of that. Ms. Ayu Abdullah. Now, Ms. Ayu Abdullah is based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. She is a co-founder and co-executive director of Energy Action Partners, an international NGO focusing on capacity building and community development. Okay? She shall introduce to us the work done by her organization, their approach on community engagement, collaborative and participatory access and mini-grid programs. Ms. Ayu, please.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Ayu, and I'm the co-executive director for Energy Action Partners, or ENACT Partners for short. And like Dr. Chen said, we work in the space of energy access and community development with a special focus on collaborative and participatory energy access programs. We also have chosen to work primarily in the mini grid space, just because we feel like this is a bigger need and space for community development within energy access. So next slide, please. So let me just explain really quickly. Our core activities in the organization is really around improving community engagement within mini-grid development and implementation. So our organization was really established to address specific gaps and challenges that we as an organization recognize and have acknowledged over our many years of working in the sector. There's a lot of in the mini-grid space, there's a lot of innovation and advancement when it comes to providing technologies, and now there's a lot of work on sort of accessing finance and the different delivery models that are available for mini-grid implementation. And then there's also work on making sure that regulations and the ecosystem is friendly for mini-grids. But the mini-grids have not really, the uptake has been quite slow. Like, just to give you an idea, Dr. Chen talked earlier about how there's still over 700 million people worldwide without energy access. And, I think estimates are that we will require around 200,000 mini-grids to deliver SDG 7 by 2030. And that's assuming that over 70% of energy access systems and technologies come from mini-grid systems. And currently there's only been, to date, 20,000 systems implemented worldwide, with about, almost 6,000 that are still operational as of, this year. And so we're very, very far away from the SDG 7 target, extremely far away. And so I think that as an organization, our stand is that there needs to be, a paradigm shift. There needs to be new approaches, new methods, new technologies, new delivery models, just a complete shift in mindset. And so one thing that we recognize as an organization is that this is not a technological problem. It's a techno-socio-economic issue that really requires solutions that are approaching it from all these perspectives. And so we have, we focus on community engagement because we believe that there's been a lot of focus on the demand and supply side, providing electrification, providing connections. But there has been a huge gap in looking at the end user side of the issue and problem, and looking at and exploring and accounting for end user behavior within mini-grid systems. And so next slide, please. And so Fauzi before this, touched on this a little bit on how, you can implement systems in very rural and remote spaces, but then if there is a lack of community engagement, buy-in, cooperation, it's very difficult to operate these mini-grid systems for rural electrification purposes because they're far away from all of the usual infrastructure and services that we use to operate the systems. So at the very minimum, community engagement is required to ensure that the systems are fulfilling, local needs and priorities. But you also require, community engagement to ensure the sustainability of the system. You want buy-in, involvement, ownership. You want local management and capacity to run the system independently. Next slide, please. And so our flagship program is actually the Community Energy Toolkit, or COMET for short. This is an approach and a tool that our organization has been working on for the last couple of years. The tool is a simulation software of a mini-grid system that we use as an educational tool and also as a demand exploration tool. So we've designed this tool for mini-grid developers and operators to partner more closely with communities, and they can take it to the communities and co-design and co-develop energy systems with them. So it's a simulation system which you can explore different scenarios around mini-grids. You can use it to test tariffs, test management and delivery structures, and then also build up demand. And so you can use it to explore demand stimulation, productive end use. And a lot of the more complex and technical problems that are usually complicated and complex for rural users to understand without having had some exposure or experience. I can speak about this a little bit more if anybody has more questions later, but this is just a snapshot of what we as an organization have worked with. We've been using this tool and approach with practitioners and mini-grid developers in the last couple of years. And we've used it with 13 communities across 5 countries. And so this has helped developers and communities really understand the issues around mini-grids in order to manage mini-grids more sustainably. That's all I have, and I think we can continue with our discussion.
Sure, okay. Thank you very much, Ayu. Maybe just a quick question on this software comment. Is that something available on now? Everyone can access to it, or those interested, how do they get onto it?
Yeah, so we've been so far, we've used it directly ourselves. We've used it in partnership with other mini-grid practitioners and developers and operators. But as of early 2022, we hope to actually publicly distribute it. So starting next year, it will be available for anybody to use with a licensing structure. Yeah.
Okay, that's great then. Yeah. Before I continue, I just want to let the audience know that if you have any question, please use the chat features to enter your question, and we will take the time to address them. Okay, thank you very much. But there's something that always in my head, you talk about the mini grid, and we still need a lot of mini grid, and the progress has been very slow. I mean, why is that? Is it because mini grid are expensive? The technologies are expensive? Is that one of the main challenges?
Well, I think the main challenge is that it's not just a technical problem. It's not just about delivering connections. In order for mini grids to work, you really do need the community to understand what the electricity is there for, what it can do for them. There needs to be buy-in from the community, and it needs to be designed appropriately, to the needs of the needs and priorities of the community. And so I think that is a very complex issue to deal with, and so it requires a deep understanding of the community. It requires resources, of course, in talking about infrastructure. And so I think the uptake has been slow just because in many places you either are very good at delivering the technology but not necessarily addressing all the other needs of the community, or you're very good at addressing the socio needs of the community but not the technology. And so you kind of need a mix of that. And so it's been very challenging for energy practitioners all around the world to ensure that they have all the right skill sets and the right resources to achieve all of this. And I think as a sector, we have actually put this burden on a lot of the practitioners to be able to do all of this. And we need to actually be looking at it very honestly and asking ourselves, well, what are the real needs, and how can we break that up, and how can we really address all these different perspectives and needs and challenges.
And Dr. Chen, if I may, to jump in this conversation about the barriers of the mini grid very quickly. Apart from those barriers that you mentioned, you mentioned and face perhaps in Malaysia, but look at broader, other countries, there are still regulatory barriers in many countries that mini grid is not really decentralized to local, or even is actually my question to Ms. Ayu, which we can leave that for after the end of our presentation. Just to add on for these kind of barriers of mini grids, there are still big regulatory barriers in many countries that community-based grid or social enterprise are not allowed to sell electricity by themselves. It has to be a state-owned or the state-owned. So again, as you mentioned, is actually a political economy kind of a barriers, not actually, no, it's not a technological barrier. Let me stop here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Sooksiri, for adding your opinion to this. So maybe before I move on to the next one, maybe I just just have one question. Want to continue on this is do you see private sector get involved in this? You know, a lot of this talking about the access, particularly in the rural areas. People tend to look at what the government is doing because you need funding, policy, that kind of thing. So, do you think we should be tackling that? You know, in your organization, you're focusing more towards the government side, or do you try to get private sector to come in?
So, I mean, we, to Ms. Sooksiri's point, that the ecosystem, the policy and regulatory environment has to be friendly in order for other stakeholders and entities to be able to play a role and play a substantive role, like a meaningful role, right? And not just, be providing, for example, CSR projects or anything like that. And so in Malaysia, for example, we do have an issue of where the private sector can't really play a big role because of you aren't allowed to sell electricity. You can be registered, under 70 kilowatts, right? You can be registered, but you can't produce electricity. And so then they can't play a role where, they can put all their resources to it because there's no profit for them, right? And so I think you do have to think about what type of policies can encourage different stakeholders to get involved. And unfortunately, this is still, within the scope of the government, right? And so, yeah, for the private sector to get involved in any meaningful way, I think some of those policies and that environment has to change.
Okay, all right, thank you. Maybe I can chip in a little bit since I'm so involved in looking at some of these projects. In the context of Sarawak, we have this energy equality issue as well, in terms of everybody have equal access to it and everybody is expected to pay the same amount. But we know the cost of producing electricity at different corners of the areas are different, right? When you're economy of scale and the kind of thing. So it is a challenge in terms of how you can recover the cost of the investment. So that is, I see as from my own experience, as the major hurdles in terms of getting private sector to come in. Yeah, because there is the tariff is regulated basically. In the way the tariff is decided by the government, and a lot of time the tariff and the socio-economic environment of the community are not able to support some of the projects. Yeah. But thank you for all your opinion. We will come back today. So I would like to move on to our last speaker, Mr. Divyam Nagpal. Okay, Mr. Divyam is with IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency, and he is currently based in Abu Dhabi. He is a program officer for Energy Access Program in IRENA. So you share with us the roles of IRENA and also the how we support countries, how IRENA support countries in their transition to a more sustainable energy future, and also some of their energy access program. Okay, Mr. Divyam, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chen, and it's a great pleasure to be part of this panel discussion. Yes, I come from the International Renewable Energy Agency. We are an intergovernmental organization currently working with over 184 member countries who are our member countries or states in accession, where we support acceleration of renewable energy adoption, both large scale but also decentralized renewables, particularly in the energy access context. So the benefit of going last is that a lot of the main points have been made. So I'll just stick to the sort of 3 or 4 points that I'd like to sort of emphasize, also picking up on some of the discussions that have already happened. I think the first point I'd like to emphasize is, of course, that ending energy poverty will require a multi-pronged approach. So you need the centralized, the grid infrastructure, but you also need the decentralized, the mini grids, the standalone systems, particularly to reach remote areas, island communities for last mile connectivity. What's also becoming interesting is the sort of solutions at the intersection of centralized and decentralized, where utilities are also looking at grid interconnected mini grids, are looking at embedded generation at the last mile to improve quality of supply. So those are, of course, additional areas where a lot of innovation is happening. There is a significant potential for renewables. So Southeast Asia has a very strong microhydro ecosystem, as well as biomass-based energy ecosystem. Now, increasingly with solar decentralized as well, that can be tapped to improve energy access. But I think one point that I'd like to emphasize is that energy poverty goes beyond electricity, right? So there's also the clean cooking dimension that we must tackle. Dr. Chen, you mentioned that 2.6 billion are without clean cooking. I think in the ASEAN the number is a little over 200 million, and actually progress on clean cooking is been extremely slow, and we are nowhere close to getting where we need to be by 2030. There are a number of solutions there. Some also, based on biogas, for instance. A lot of countries in the region, like Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, others have had household biodigester programs looking at livestock waste, etc., to improve clean cooking, as well as electric cooking. So I saw, in Mr. Fauzi's presentation, electric cookers are a part of the package. And electric cooking is interesting because it also provides synergies with electrification and demand stimulation for utilities, particularly in rural areas. A third point I'd like to make is that, of course, we want to end energy poverty, but the end goal has to be to end poverty itself. So I think really picking up on points that also the colleague from UNIDO made is how do we really go beyond those connections, as Ayu was saying, and link it to services in the agriculture sector for agro-processing, whether it's in the rice value chain or other relevant value chains in those countries, and really trigger income generation in rural areas, because that is the only short way of ending poverty, but also for communities in the long run to pay for the energy services that they're consuming. But also going beyond households, looking at schools, healthcare facilities, and all of that, which become a priority, especially in this day and age. But to end poverty, you need a broader ecosystem, which is also what was mentioned before. You need access to financing, not just for the energy technology, but also for the agro-processing equipment, for the appliances. You need access to markets. You need skills, not just to maintain the energy system, but also maybe to upskill in terms of the enterprise that you're going to create or work on. So really that ecosystem has to exist, be built, and it has to be funded. So the money doesn't just have to go into the energy tech, but a lot of the money also has to go into the broader ecosystem. And finally, the importance of dedicated policies. It's already been touched a lot. We need dedicated policies for decentralized renewables. If we talk about mini grids, how do we license those mini grids? How do we set the tariffs to ensure cost recovery? What happens when the main grid comes? What happens to private sector investment? What kind of public financing is required to bridge the gap? I just end by saying that in no country in the world we've ended energy poverty with only private sector capital or on the basis of a pure business activity. But governments and public financing has to play a critical role and bridge the viability gap that will always exist when you connect a new household or a new enterprise with energy. And the question is how exactly do we structure that public financing? How exactly we structure that public-private partnership with the private sector to make sure that it's a win-win-win for everybody and the community is at the center of all of this. So I'll pause here and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Divyam. Thank you for sharing very insightful opinions on the matters. Maybe just a quick question to you. I mean, ARENA, you are the agency that pushing for renewable energy, encouraging renewable energy, But they were actually like what Sooksiri had mentioned, in some of the rural area, it's easier to just give them a diesel generator and they just go, no? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think, are we trying to do too much in the sense of trying to, doing both at the same time, And that in a way may be slowing down the energy access goal, what's your opinion on that, or what's your experience on that?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really fundamentally we have to look at how the ecosystem is designed. So, for example, why is a diesel generator today cheaper for, let's say, a pig farmer to use for electricity, right? It's because the supply chains already exist. The capital cost is low, but the operational cost is higher for a diesel generator, right? And then there is a resilience issue associated with the fuel itself, right? Now, the existing financing ecosystem, technology ecosystem supports that solution. But if I bring in a renewable, a solar based solution or a biogas based solution, I need a new financing product which values the high upfront cost but much lower lifetime costs, right? Because even if, let's say, there are in Cambodia, a lot of pig farmers have gone towards solar based supply to reduce their energy costs for basically heating needs, incubation needs, and all of that, right? Now the point is that if I'm able to create those financial products, then for that farmer it's financially viable to go for a renewable energy based system. So I think it's not so much about what makes, what is financial viability at the end of the day. It's what kind of financial products are available and what we value as an ecosystem moving forward. Do we value resilience over the long term, or do we value cost at t equal to zero and not worry about anything that comes later on? So I think when we look at the overall equation, not even accounting for the climate impacts, I think renewables are definitely a win-win for both rural communities but also for large scale infrastructure.
Okay, thank you very much, Divyam. Yeah. Okay, again, any of you, I'll open the floor for question. We don't have many questions from the audience, so if any of you have any question, please, just sorry, Lights. Sooksiri, you want to ask something?
Well, actually, I would like to supplement what IRENA colleague mentioned. I appreciate you mentioned about this access to clean cooking. And this also linked with the conversation that we are having in terms of financial kind of aspect of this, access to clean and low carbon energy services. Let's say in many rural areas in Laos and Vietnam, they have this coal abundance. Those kind of low grade quality anthracite, and they made this coal cake available, in many rural areas, and these come very cheap. So most of the time, households just use this coal cake as a cooking fuel. And even though they are connected to the electricity, name it be the main grid or the mini grid, this coal cake is still, more abundant and cheap, of course. So again, it comes back to the cost and then also the path dependency of fossil fuel. We are all born with fossil fuel, coal, diesel, and gasoline. And this is habit or familiarity that is hard to push away. So this is for kind of this access to the clean cooking fuel. That's exactly what Irina colleague just mentioned. Is the rate of this SDG7 on this particular access to clean and affordable cooking fuel is even slower than the access to the electricity. So that's one point. And then also the second point, just to also supplement Irina colleague again in terms of the banking financial institutions in financing low carbon and renewable energy kind of project or mini grids. Yeah, financial products for this particular renewable energy is one thing, but again, is actually um, so the bank uh, staff, the lending staff will, their knowledge will compare immediately with the diesel genset. So this mindset has to be removed. I still don't know how, but all of our projects in this ASEAN region, we still face this, even, and then in particular, this COVID would actually exacerbate the lending kind of products for these SMEs or even the community to invest in low carbon technologies, because immediately they would ask not just the financial return, it's also the fact that we as a energy community still need to educate the banking system. So yeah, let me stop here so I can we let's hear from other colleagues as
Okay.
well. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Sooksiri. Yeah, I think we've been, we're looking at the supply sides, So basically, like what you said rightly, we need to change our habits of what is traditional has been there. Maybe I turn away to the other angle on the demand side, and this question perhaps will address Ayu and Mr. Fauzi as well, particularly in rural areas, in some community, we see very low ownership of appliances. Basically, there's not much knowledge in terms of use of electricity. Now, do you see that? How do you engage them, or how do you overcome that problem so that they can really take the real benefit of whatever that is given to them? Do you have any comments to add on this? Perhaps you can go.
Yeah. So in our experience, the main thing that we try to address when we work with communities is a lot of times the communities don't fully understand the level of service that they're getting. And so, they understand, I'm getting electricity from this hour to this hour. Maybe if it's a solar system, I have a limit on it and that's about it. There's no understanding on power versus energy, what that means. There's no understanding also about, what it means as a community in order to share, because it is a common pool resource. And so first of all, you need to actually get them to understand the level of service that they're getting for what they're paying. Once they do that, then they better understand how to use the appliances that they have access to or they can purchase, right? And what that does for them. And usually once you address those issues, users will understand what it's there for, and they can then be in the driver's seat of what they're going to use electricity for. So I think that there needs to be a little bit more work when you're communicating to them, what the mini grid is and what they can use it for. It's a simplified way of putting things. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fauzi, you have anything to add about the Sarawak case?
Just a very quick one is that what we found is once we give them power, there will be a slow increase in the utilization of the equipment. They will start buying. And in fact, we have to actually in the case of SAREF, limit the power. So naturally, when they know that certain equipment could be used, they will know what equipment to use, and if they don't have any limits to the power, for example, I think eventually they will get to know what can be used, what cannot be used. In the case of SAREF, we actually limit the power, because otherwise the system will fail very quickly. And what we found out is that they eventually know how to use the equipment versus the amount of energy that is given to them. So they do know how to match the power requirement versus the quota of energy. So there's a quick one I can mention about where they match the usage against what they are given. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Chen.
Thank you. Okay. I hope you get that. I think what Mr. Fauzi was saying, that in terms of knowledge on the use of electrical appliances in Malaysia is quite high. So, the people know how to adjust themselves according to the limitation of the system that we provide for them. Okay. I have 2 minutes left. Perhaps the last question to address to Sooksiri and Divyam. As we can see from COP26, it's really when we have major goal involve all the countries, it's hard to get everyone to agree on everything. Does UNIDO or ARENA, do you look at something on smaller scale, country to country, or regional kind of initiative that can get things moving easier? Maybe Sooksiri first, yeah.
Okay, well, sure, thanks. Well, COP26 or not, I've been working with in Malaysia. So one issue I've been advocating, and then we is the rationalization of the fossil fuel prices. And CASA has been kind of thinking to do the carbon taxation, but many bunch of solid empirical studies saying that if you want to compare the carbon emission reduction impacts of the rationalization of fossil fuel prices versus the carbon taxation, the removal of subsidies have more impact has more impact. So that is something that I'm working with small group of the UN agencies in Bangkok in terms of this carbon pricing. So this carbon taxation or the fossil fuel rationalization is part of this carbon pricing as a whole. And the one kind of a major achievements of this COP26 is the carbon markets. So with the UN regional level here in Bangkok, the bunch of UN agencies here. So we are looking at that as well. So in short, yes, we are looking at the Glasgow Pact kind of next steps. And then perhaps the first step we're going to work together and with countries is this carbon pricing as a big umbrella, and then carbon markets or fossil fuel desubsidization is part of that. And one last point is that UNIDO did a modeling exercise on the trade competitiveness if energy prices have increased. And then we found in many countries that the firm will be more competitive if the energy prices are increased. This is on kind of a contrary to the conventional wisdom. So we would like to modeling this study in ASEAN countries as well. We did in Indonesia though. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Sooksiri. Divyam, you've had
Sure.
anything quick, a short one?
Yeah,
One? Yeah.
very, very quick. I know we're almost out of time. So at IRENA, we think that the energy transition, as in to move towards renewables, the pathway will vary from country to country because the contexts are so different. So we provide support to countries in different ways. I think just to on the energy poverty side, for example, we do a lot of work on entrepreneurship promotion, so providing incubation facilities with partners to enterprises working in the energy access space. So I know there's a question on the role of SMEs, because SMEs will be absolutely crucial in providing services to those remote rural areas. IRENA also provides policy and regulatory support to governments on mini grids, standalone solar systems to make sure we can attract the right kind of investments. And finally, we do a lot of work now on linking energy with other sectors like agriculture and others. So next month, in fact, we'll be launching a major report on Southeast Asia case studies, in fact, on how decentralized renewables are being linked to agriculture sector and the impact that has in terms of benefits, both socioeconomic and environmental. And a final point, just to respond to one of the questions, is that indeed we've seen, in cases where you bring energy access and there are old clusters, so for example, villages which have been doing pottery for generations, you bring energy access, you mechanize those processes, reduce the drudgery, and the youth actually want to stay there and build the enterprises from those rural areas. So that actually does have a reverse migration impact as well. But of course, this is an anecdotal evidence. So I'll pause here and over to you, Dr. Chan.
Okay, thank you very much, Divyam. And yes, I'm sorry we run out of time, so I think I need to wrap up. And I think we do have a few questions from the audience, and we'll try to address to you or answer back the question to the platform. So just allow me to quickly wrap up the whole session. I think we all have, from hearing what the speaker have said today, we have the data, we know where we are, we know what needs to be done. We have a lot of things. And in fact, there are many dialogues on this particular issue on energy access as well. As recently as in September 2021 at the UN Assembly, there was a high-level dialogue on energy, and they had so-called representatives from around the world out there. So we all know what we need to do, but what we really need now is really put our thoughts and our strategy into action. We need action, and more action, for things to happen, so that we can make a real positive change, in the coming decades. We have a target of 2030, so it's very, very challenging. And just like I said here in Sarawak, we also have the similar goals. So by 2030, we hope we will reach a developed nation status for the state of Sarawak. And Sarawak Energy, we're committed to ensure energy access to electricity for everyone, regardless of how remote they stay. So in that effort, we think we have something to share, and we look forward to partner with any organization here in ASEAN or anywhere around the world, no? And to turn this energy access for all dreams into a reality. So I'd like to thank you, everyone, for your participation. Okay, and my sincere gratitude to the panel speaker. Very interesting discussion, I think. And I hope that everyone have learned something new today. I certainly have. And do enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.